Welcome, everyone. I'm Joanna Ross, the product marketing lead at CreditorWatch. Welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for our webinar on taking control of identity fraud prevention in your business. I'm joined today by a few of my esteemed colleagues from CreditorWatch, as well as our partner IDVerse, LexisNexis. So let me introduce our presenters today. We're joined first by Paul Warren-Tate. Paul is the Chief Risk and Product Strategy Officer at IDVerse. He has over 25 years of global experience in the cyber, financial crime, and operational risk space. Most recently, 10 years in the Australian financial services industry, and most recently has taken his considerable expertise to the technology space. I've personally heard Paul present on fraud and the evolving technology landscape, and he is extremely knowledgeable, so we're very privileged to have him with us today. Welcome, Paul. From CreditorWatch, we also have Abdallah El-Haddad. Abdallah is the enterprise manager. He has been at CreditorWatch for 3 years and in the industry of credit risk for over 14 years now, working with anti-money laundering regulated businesses since Tranche 1 regulations first rolled out. And he currently supports CreditorWatch clients in the financial services and non-bank lending spaces. Welcome, Abdallah.
Thank you.
And finally, but last but not least, we have Chamira Jayasakara. Chamira is our group product manager for our suite of onboarding products at CreditorWatch. He is passionate about helping customers onboard profitable businesses faster with less friction. So today's agenda, I will give a brief overview of the current state of fraud in Australia. We'll then hand it over to Paul and Abdallah for our fireside chat. Chamira will then give us an overview of our new integration with IDVerse, our DVS and Apply Easy solution. And then we'll open up the floor for questions. Of course, if at any time during the webinar you think of a question you'd like us to respond to, please pop that into the Q&A at any point during the session, and we will respond at the end of the webinar. So just to give some context for today's discussion, fraud in Australia is certainly a problem that's not abating anytime soon. Over $2 billion was lost to scams last year alone, increasingly to AI-driven scams specifically, and Paul and Abdallah will discuss that in more detail. Specifically, half of those organizations cited synthetic identity as their top challenge. And in APAC, we saw a 37% year-over-year increase in the overall attacks by bad human actors. So this is compounded by some evolving regulatory requirements coming into the Australian market next year. Of course, most of the businesses on this call would be familiar with the Tranche 2 regulations that are coming next July. This essentially extends anti-money laundering and know your customer regulations beyond the financial sector. So certain industries will now be affected, including real estate and property, the legal and accounting space, and a few others. In addition to that, of course, financial crime is often accelerated by fraud. So putting in place any sort of compliance program will necessitate attention to fraud prevention. And finally, we see that regulators are starting to take notice of the evolving AI technology landscape, specifically around fraud techniques, and they're starting to introduce new, more stringent checks around identity that you need to be familiar with. Now, one thing that I've heard Paul speak on and that we'll dive into in a few moments is fraud techniques are now outpacing human intelligence. So LexisNexis has noted a 100% increase in digitally enabled fraud over the last 12 months. Importantly, this extends beyond just your traditional deepfake video that everyone thinks of when we say the word deepfake, to synthetic identity documents. And we're going to talk about how to understand, recognize those, and combat them. So essentially, this means that the days of a handshake, taking a photograph of your client's driver's license with your iPhone and then sticking it in your SharePoint folder are truly gone. Unfortunately, humans, even well-trained, very experienced humans, can no longer detect sophisticated fake documents. And so what we're seeing is this modern triple threat, if you want to call it that, of real data that is stolen by threat actors, live faces that are probably not the real faces of the data they've stolen, and then deepfake documents they've very sophisticatedly altered through AI. What this means is that basically technology approaches to combat this situation are no longer a nice to have, they are an essential for your business. So we're going to start our fireside chat in just a moment, but first I'd love to get a little bit of read of our audience today into how you're feeling about fraud prevention in your business. So just take a second to answer, what do you see as the biggest challenge in preventing fraud within your business today? Is it keeping up with new fraud techniques, balancing customer experience with security, a lack of real-time data or alerts, compliance regulations, or something else? We'll just take a couple moments to let you answer that. All right. So thanks for taking the time to respond to that. So it looks like the most daunting challenge in terms of preventing fraud is keeping up with the techniques of the threat actors. That's not surprising, and that's exactly what we're going to address today, so that's good. Followed by balancing customer experience. Also something top of mind for our product team, so we'll speak on that. And then a little bit of a lack of real-time data, regulatory compliance concerns, or something else. So I'd love to turn the tables over now to Paul and Abdallah for our fireside chat on how to uplevel fraud prevention with technology.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Joanna. Some really interesting stats there and feedback from everyone. And welcome, Paul, and thank you, IDVerse and LexisNexis. I guess we've been hearing about AML Tranche 2 for so many years. It's coming, it's now a reality. What does the new legislation actually mean, and who does it affect?
I think it's a great question. So you take a step back. There is a kind of a global AML watchdog, which is obviously the Financial Action Task Force, which is your set kind of international standards, what every major country should be kind of following of how do we think about stopping money laundering and funding and terrorism. So money laundering just doesn't happen through banks. So tranche 1 for Australia is very much banking and financial services. So that's tranche 1. It does happen a lot of other kind of money is laundered through lawyers, accountants, estates, and those kind of company formation services, which is where we're kind of getting to kind of that tranche 2 perspective. So Australia has been almost been picked up by on their regulatory side to say, you need to improve. You're covering the tranche 1, but there's other ways we need to think about it. So it's not just the Australian government's trying to regulate it. This is a global policy of how we're trying to try and stop money laundering, because we know this money isn't being used for good. So it's really trying to ensure that anywhere that these obviously organized crime units of either laundering money or creating fraud or any sorts of financial crime, we can stop them from actually committing the crime, which is probably the most important part. So I think it's a great step forward. It's finally delivered. It's been talked about it for some time. And the idea is really simple. It's money laundering isn't just a banking problem. So the rules shouldn't stop at banks. So it's nice and simple, I think. So I don't think it's overwhelming. But you kind of think, well, where do I start? You kind of think, well, anything from a device perspective is trying to think about it simple. It's like map what you already do, kind of identify some gaps, pick tech that will work efficiently and actually work effectively, and then start small and iterate fast.
That's really interesting. I guess a lot of businesses don't think they're going to be hit with fraud or anti-money laundering, but it does happen. It's a global rule set that's now finally coming over to Australia. I guess, one of the second most important thing that the crowd mentioned was sort of customer experience. But how do you think these new legislative changes are going to change the way businesses onboard their customers?
I think it's looking to leverage technology. So a lot of where it's obviously moving towards, and because of the fraud threat landscape, technology needs to be used in order to stop fraudsters and people trying to impersonate other people. And I think, Joanna, we've got some good examples of what kind of deepfake fraud would look like, which I might just touch on, seeing as this is where the poll kind of sits as we're trying to keep up with the deepfake fraud. Deepfake frauds are getting better every day. I think if we look at the one on the left, which is kind of a few years ago, it feels like it's a slightly photoshopped version. So what they're now creating when we're talking about people doing deepfakes and trying to commit either fraud or impersonation or opening a kind of account, so knowing that you don't know who's opening the account, they're using generated deepfake documents to bypass, obviously, the onboarding kind of checks. When they do that, they're using either stolen data and open source deepfake generators, and they can be found not even on the dark web. You can Google and search for them and create an artifact in 60 seconds for about $10, and you have a image of a document. The one on the left, as I said, kind of feels a bit photoshopped in essence. But the one on the right and the improvements, obviously everyone now uses OpenAI and ChatGPT, and everything has been improving. The more it gets used, the better it gets, therefore the better it can produce artifacts which look like a real physical document, which is obviously, as we know, when we kind of do these tools, you take a photo of an identity document. Now, if you look at this, they actually makes you trick a human reviewer. So when you say it's, well, what are we trying to do? We're trying to ensure that the person is who they say they are. And when you talk about remote sense, you need to obviously tie it back to a government issued identity, because proving someone's identity is fairly relatively inherently simple. I am who I say I am. I'm a real person. I move and I have a government issued identity, and I'm a real person, which are the two kind of key things. So that first one is now, if we sent these to anyone, these are tricking what human reviewers are actually then being able to pick up, which is quite concerning.
Yeah, definitely. That actually is very concerning. To the naked eye, I would say both of those look like a real license to me. I think that's really the importance of being able to work with really smart technology to understand what that looks like. I guess if we're putting ourselves in the feet and the shoes of newly regulated businesses, and there's this legislative change that's coming, but the ways that technology can sort of help eliminate also fraud as well. But how can they put those two things together with AML Tranche 2 compliance? What are some of the first steps businesses should start considering with AML Tranche 2 and regulation?
Yeah, I think AML, I think we don't want to overcomplicate it. It's almost a compliance journey rather than thinking it's a panic attack. Oh my God, I need to do all of this stuff in order to do it. We need to obviously kind of keep it simple so it doesn't feel kind of like it's overwhelming. So when we're thinking about what they're actually doing, it's fairly simple. They're saying, have some process to think about what are the risks associated with money laundering? Like, how would a person use a real estate, buy some real estate or buy some high level goods, to think about what are your risks associated with the business? And that's not particularly difficult. There's everyone in the industry, and I think there's other tools and fintechs out there which can help about that risk assessment process and identify those. Those are fairly generic to the industry. So if you know what you're actually exposed to, then how are you then controlling it? Which to a large degree is, do you know who the person is? So a good KYC process, know your customer. Can I prove Paul is who he says he is? And do I know where the kind of the source of funds that he's actually coming from? So in that essence, it's kind of going, right, we've got some risks. I can onboard people. I can monitor their usage to ensure that there isn't sorts of anomalies or potentially things which don't look right. Suddenly, lots of high-level transactions or something, there are pieces which look suspicious. And again, there's good guidance around there. So it's, you know what your process is. So put some governance in place, put some onboarding in place, put some monitoring in place, and leverage technology. I wouldn't be relying on manual processes, because I think when a lot of people think in now they're doing KYC, when you go and rent a property, for instance, they're like, oh, can I have a copy of your passport or your driver's license? People send that willingly, and you're like, do you know where your information is gone? So that's, whilst you can be compliant, it doesn't always stop fraud, or think about how do we protect that person's privacy, which is why we're talking around let's leverage technology to reduce storing large amounts of personal information. You're minimizing data, you're looking after the Australian public, and then start it very small, but iterate as and when you kind of see gaps.
That's really interesting. It's interesting you mentioned people taking copies of documentation. Test drove a car a few weeks ago, and yeah, I just handed over my driver's license, photocopy of it, and I'm hoping it's in a locked cage at the moment, not sitting on somebody's desk. But it's just really interesting to think about it from that perspective as well, right? Like, businesses have a requirement to protect their customers and protect their customers' data as well. So very, very interesting. Aside from losing goods and getting bad debt, what are some of the other issues or risks that you see without, by not complying with the new legislation, or letting fraud sort of start taking over your business?
I think fraud losses, speak for themselves. One interesting component is, from the analysis, LexisNexis Risk Solutions has looked about the cost of fraud. So for every dollar that you lose, it costs you 4 times as much to then go and do the investigation, look at the work, actually the knock-on effect, which we kind of go, fraud losses are fairly evident, but the knock-on effect of having the people, processes, and technologies to then investigate, look, resolve has a big impact on that kind of the process efficiency. So if you're having to do a lot of that, you're wasting kind of time and effort that you could have actually stopped them from getting into the system. So you think about how does that kind of process efficiencies. If you're thinking about how do I protect using technology to onboard someone, you're kind of keeping their privacy secure. So you can think about it's efficient, it's simple, it's effective, whilst it's being preserving from a compliance perspective. I think we don't want to, when you design compliance process, really think about how do I manage to the intent, when the intent of money laundering, I want to stop impersonations or fraud, rather than thinking about I have a set of guidelines, I've got to tick off the guidelines. Because from a compliance perspective, you end up managing a process rather than actually managing the risk associated with it. And that's where a lot of tranche 2 is being pushed towards, of going, you should understand your risk and you should manage your risk rather than manage a process. So there's a shift in kind of businesses to understand how to be compliant, rather than it's compliance for the sake of being compliant. It's, am I managing the risks associated? Because we've seen lots of businesses who are AML compliant, but are not stopping fraud. But they're like, well, I've met all your requirements, but we're still losing fraud. Why is that? And I'm like, well, you just made sure and you ticked off that I've done things, but you haven't thought about the risks associated with what fraudsters are doing. So having the two conjoined has to kind of happen.
Yeah, that's great. What a insane stat. For every $1, it's 4 times to investigate that. That's a huge amount of cost to any business when, like you mentioned, maybe it's stopping them getting through those front doors to begin with, could really be the biggest cost saver for you. That's a really interesting stat. I want to get mystical for a little bit. Let's look into your crystal ball for a sec. In the next 5 years, how do you think, or what do you predict the landscape for AML compliance and fraud is going to look like?
I think fraud is not going away. I'd love it to be able to say we're minimizing it, and money laundering is reducing, because we know these organized crimes aren't solving world peace or world hunger. It is causing an issue to the global economy. It's causing issues to businesses. There's a knock-on effect more broadly. There is a kind of the kind of cultural kind of side and the impact. But I think what's coming, the regulations will be very much towards organizations to say, how do you manage your risk? Are you managing to the intent of the regulation? They were not going to give you very prescriptive, thou must do steps 1 to 10, because they've seen issues with that in the past. I think the evolving fraud threat landscape, they're leveraging obviously tools in order to bypass those. And we're only going to see a proliferation of those. So people from remotely can get access into products and services where they can commit some level of financial crime. They don't have to be present. They can be anywhere in the world. It's a global fraud threat landscape. And generative AI and tools which fraud rings are using are easily accessible. They're low cost. Their speed to actually starting an attack is fairly significant. And I think we've got some good examples, Joanna. I can just probably bring up the next one, which I will pause on the previous one. If you just go to the dissociated identity disorder, it's a great title. I'll pause and I'll also ask Abdullah if you can pick up what is how are all 4 of these identities joined together? There is a common trend between all 4 of these. I'll see if you can pick it. I'll test you while people are looking at this screen, no doubt looking in towards and trying to understand why they all look and feel. What's the common denominator?
They're all male.
That is right. They're all actually me. They're all actually my face on each and every one of those documents. So the ones we created over on the left are purely synthetic documents, and we've overlaid just my eyes, my nose, and my mouth. I can tell that one in the top left is me. I can tell by my cheeks. I know what my smile looks like. So it's easily identifiable for me. Then you put a bit beard on me. The ones on 2 on the right are actual a document which has been sitting in one of our engineers has taken a photo and then just overlaid my face. Now, why is this important? Joanna, if we go to the next slide, we're seeing fraud rings actually use this attack. In essence, if you hit space, the other 2 pictures will come up. I think it's just how the documents are. So what we see here, and this is a fraud ring out of Eastern Europe, which has been hitting Australia and New Zealand pretty hard. They have now fraudsters know I need an image of a document. They've got an image of a document. Great. All of the information on that image of the document is correct. It's stolen information. It's probably either a leaked photo or a generative something created. But if I send that information to the DVS, that information will come back as a pass. They've got a live person. So they need to know, I've got an image. I need a live person. They have a live person. And it needs to match from the face. And this is where the face morphing and the image is quite important, because when you use facial recognition, it's about eyes, nose, mouth. So if I use just that component of the face and overlay it, now the fraudster has an image of a document. They pass the DVS. They have a live. So great. In essence, if we didn't pick up that that was an image and a fraudulent document in the front, they would commit fraud. And why we've identified that is being able to pick up that this is a manipulated image and a deepfake image, and they've morphed that face on there to be able to stop it. And fraudsters know that they've got technology, and they're seeing that we're using technology to stop them. They're trying to find ways to bypass it. Now, this out of Eastern Europe, they're probably paying these people, teenagers, maybe $50. Can I come in and have a 7-second video of you? They're not knowing these people are probably completely unaware they're committing fraud in another country. The people never touch their camera. The actual real telltale sign, when you look at the more of the detail, each of these people are in their kind of 30s to 40s. The guy on the middle was born in 1978. He definitely is not 49 years old, unless they've got some great Botox out of Eastern Europe. But they're knowing that they're targeting certain people, and they're probably the more vulnerable, the older, they're probably less likely to identify these things, but they're finding ways to bypass it. So I think, what are we going to see? We're just going to see more of this. We're going to see more sorts of generative AI tools as they develop, they improve. There'll be new fraud techniques. There'll be new AI deepfake generators, which are creating. We know we've got kind of a Google kind of releasing them, and everyone's on a race to create the best. But we're going to see these tools, unfortunately, used for bad. And it's about our process to stay. How do we stay ahead of it to be able to stop them? But also, we're not going to be perfect. No technology is going to be perfect, but it's how quickly we can iterate and move and deal with the times, because fraudsters are great at using bleeding edge technology and being very innovative. The regulation which needs to move, it's not about putting in a technology solution and forgetting about it. It has to move with the times. And that's where I think it's going to be really important to change that mindset around for businesses. It's compliance isn't put a process in place and it's set and forget. It has to continually evolve to deal with this changing fraud threat landscape, because things are going to change and you need to move quickly and effectively. And the regulations and processes and systems and how do you make sure you're staying across is going to be really imperative to bringing that ability to stop fraud.
Yeah, wow. I mean, a couple of things there. That was a scary test, I think, to the naked eye. It is very easy to see that that ID was in a document. And I think about all the customers and businesses across Australia that get ID documents that they just quickly check. And I think it also really highlights the importance that DVS only checks are not going to help you prevent fraud. Anyone can take anybody else's driver's license and submit that. It's really important to have that technology in place. And additionally, if anyone has that Eastern European Botox contact, just share that.
I can do
Share that. The audience might want to know a couple too. But I guess before we move on to our Q&A, I want to be really frank. How do you think businesses can best meet their compliance requirements? How should they be storing PII securely? What technologies are you thinking out there?
I think it's knowing that there are technology solutions which are out there. And I think it's important, rather than going, I need to develop my own processes. Let's think about how do we leverage technology out there. But the important part is when you go and select a technology provider, how do you assess and think about, does it actually work? So great, I use an AI powered KYC tool, but how do you know it works? It's great as IDVerse and LexisNexis Risk Solutions, we can say our technology solutions work, but you also need to go, has it been independently tested and verified against kind of industry best practice? Because there's ways to obviously do assessments of these tools to obviously ensure you get some confidence it's not just a black box, which is what the regulators obviously don't want you buying. So you don't want to just go, oh, I put in a technology solution, I don't know how it works, and I don't know what it gets the answers from. So we think about, how do you assess the actual technology providers? There's guidance out there. There's Gartner's got a good, how do you buy identity verification tools? And there's other ways we could be transparent and help organizations think about that process, which is really important. And we can obviously, as a group, verify that our solutions work because it gets tested on a regular basis. But also think about the bias component from a technology. Does it work with anyone and everyone? I think there's some very well-known, publicly known cases where certain individuals, when we think about in the US, does the technology work on all demographics? There was a instance where I think there's the Netflix coded bias solution where Amazon's facial recognition didn't work on people of color. So in order for them to be verified, they had to wear a white mask. That is a significant issue when you're kind of thinking about, it stops fraud. But as the other component is, how do we let real people through who have broad range of demographics? And in Australia, we do have a broad range of demographics, and we have to be able to have the technology work to balance that kind of experience people, because people with real identities need to be able to get through whilst we're stopping our fraudsters. So I think that's going to be a really important process that how we're thinking about leveraging technology. It's great, but how do you get comfort that it actually works?
Thanks so much for that, Paul and Abdallah. I think there were some extremely useful insights and nuggets of learned experience in there, and some quite frightening examples of what's possible today with some basic tools. available anywhere on the internet, and some willing, fresh-faced people all over the world willing to participate, probably not knowingly participating in a fraud scheme. So some great things to think about as you're going out and considering how to build your anti-fraud strategy. So I would love to turn the mic over to Chimera and actually walk through what we've built today with our onboarding solution, integrating the IDVerse identity fraud prevention.
As we saw, there's a real threat out there. And throughout the credit application process, I think while we're doing a lot of things to make sure that they're credit worthy, we're still getting exposed when someone trying to pretend I'm someone else. So, and in the same time, if you want to do additional checks, it's a cumbersome process. I've seen multiple occasions. There are people get directed to third-party platforms, and you get asked to actually go do these verifications. Come to one of my locations with your ID so I can verify, which is all slowing the businesses down. And credit teams often don't get this transparency and visibility into what actually completed, whether I can trust the person, because as Paul mentioned, not all customers closer to me anymore. It's like cross-border, far away from us, they're connecting remotely and trading with me. And of course, credit teams actually have to expose yourself, otherwise you can't grow. So which comes at a cost as well. And in the same time, we looked at how documents getting tampered, and like someone can easily upload the ID document you are asking unless they're actually coming with the ID to your location. Providing a tampered document is very, very easy. And this is what we've been discussing. And all these things actually creates another layer of difficulty for us to onboard confidently and start trading with them. In the same time, the credit team's getting the pressure to onboard customers fast. So that's where we wanted to see how we can start leveraging our solutions and to help our customers to get them on board their customers faster. We move on to the next slide, Shana. Yeah, the key issues I've been touching on, the biggest question is, how many of us still asking them to upload a photo of their driver's license? Looking into thousands of customers using the products for over years and years, this is a very common practice everywhere. And if you want to make sure that it is not only the way we're going to do, handshaking becomes even harder and harder. We want to expand the borders, get more customers on board faster. Our sales teams, we know, knocking our doors to get more customers come through because business can expand. So we continuously add pressure as credit teams to onboard customers. And how does Apply Easy help? What it is doing? Because you know that Apply Easy was helping you identify the credit risk, whether my customer going to pay me, whether they're going to pay on time. And we were providing a lot of insights there. But in the same time, we wanted to expand and include fraud risk into credit risk and help you not only get a driver's license and store, but validate whether that's not only just even check whether do a gateway check, we call doing a government gateway, and get this ID number, the name or birthday correct. Beyond that, is there tampering? Is someone fraudulently producing a document? So this was our focus on getting you that. So what we did was we embedded it into the credit application process without interrupting the whole process and trying to stop customers, but to implement a seamless process actually can get them not only enter or upload the driver's license, but to actually physically scan. I'm going to show you shortly. But not trying to reinvent the wheel, while there are experts doing this in the market, and we went and found the best in class, got them onboarded, and build the partnership. So you already have the full best solution in the market coming to you through Apply Easy. So that's what we actually brought in. Yeah, with the solution in the Apply Easy, what things we're going to cover? in the next slide, I'm going to talk about the few key aspects of the IDVS in Apply Easy. So number one, seamless mobile ID capture, which eliminates the errors when I know a lot of credit application asks, tell me your driver's license number, what's the card number, what's the expiry date, all that. There's a lot of errors. And again, anyone who has this information can provide this. So what we try and do is through this solution, it will ask customer to present their ID and we automatically capture, extract all this information, reducing errors. In the same time, it is doing a full depth analysis of the ID to make sure that they're not presenting a photo or print out from somewhere else or a digital photo, and doing a full analysis, as well as we actually automatically passing this information and do a gateway check as well. So we do an extra level check to make sure this ID is valid and registered. And throughout the whole process, we continuously update. You can check in the Apply Easy inbox I'm going to show you shortly that you can see whether this customer actually completed this step. Is this application safe to approve, or do I need to call them and get them to do this step before I'm able to approve this application? And doing this all without putting you in the risk by getting an ID and you holding it and risking that someone will actually steal these IDs. We have seen and heard all these stories about all the big companies even getting hacked and losing a lot of information, the PII data. We're preventing that this information floating around, but validating this information on behalf of you using the best in the market. And not always doing that and only providing this capability when you want. Put the rules. Okay, this is a high risk customer. You go do these additional checks. You only spend on that. And in the same time, you don't not put your trustworthy customers through a process they reluctant to do additional checks and get dropped out during the onboarding process. Having said that, let's have a real example. What I try to do is to do a quick recording of a end-to-end credit application filling an ID capture. So why I did a recording just to save every one of us time. And because we are switching the devices as well, we thought we might actually show the process recorded fully end-to-end. Joanna can help me play that one. This is how the familiar credit application can be customized. It will be your information. Nothing changes there. Customer comes in and start the application. They start the business details and fill that and the addresses. As you already know, a lot of us, this information automatically get filled. So it will help customers to progress faster. All these steps not changing, so we can actually fast forward to the end of the application so we can see how they submit. So the applicant comes to the end, submission process exactly stays same. They provide their information. I am the sole trader. I want credit. I'm providing my information. Additionally, they provide is their phone number, so we can actually send a DVS verification message and they can verify the ID directly rather than providing you a copy or uploading, or they go down, stop the application process to get this done. We get them to complete the application and seamlessly handle everything else behind the scenes. And this is again your familiar inbox. You can search up the application. There will be multiple things you requested. The first step was e-signature request. They all go in parallel. If you have to do e-signatures and DVS, few other things, all this will go out so customer can complete them and you can track all this information. Perfect. Once you load the details, you will see that this information actually getting that. Yeah, you found the ID. So this application, we can go into the details of the application next. The application summary, there is a new tab next to the e-signatures with the verifications. You can see that we requested a verification and what is the current state. In the same time, customer received a text message and they will see the link. It's pretty straightforward. If you're in front of a computer, you still enable because you will receive this in a device with a camera. You can quickly take a photo of the ID. This is where we leverage IDVerse capabilities and the expertise they built over years and years to accurately capture the ID as well as get everything extracted off the ID. So customer don't have to manually type anything. It will be extracted off your ID. Initially, it gives the basic privacy policy saying how this content is captured and used and making sure that there's no document information is stored around and passed around. And we currently supported the Australian driver's license. That's the major use case we have. And then we're expanding into the other different information as well. So ID information got captured, everything, all the information extracted. You get opportunity to review this information to make sure it is captured well. If for any reason, glare or anything, the system will automatically detect and request you to retake the photo before you finalize. And in a very quick second, verification complete, customer get a message. In the same time, the inbox get updated as well. You don't really have to wait. As soon as this completed and you search of the application, there's my inbox I use. There are so many different inboxes. So you come to this application, you will get the status. You know that according to all these different statuses, if you requested multiple things, all these things are completed. Now my application is ready to approve. But in the same time, if you want additional details, you can go into this and download a verification statement as well. So it will only have the information we captured in the application and a verification status. We are careful to not actually extract additional information, put yourself in risk holding PII data addition. But you will have this verification statement at any given time. You can show that the reasons behind approving the application because I verified this ID against fraudulent attempt to tamper the ID, as well as we did a gateway check to confirm this ID is legit. Not just storing a photocopy or the copy of the ID and like what happened to some of the customers. I know something happened, they pulled the ID, try to do verification, and then they found the ID is fraudulent, which is too late. So we do it upfront before you do the approval of the application, and everything will be stored here. So that's in a nutshell the end-to-end process. And happy to answer any of those questions afterwards. And we're not stopping there. We address the core problem very quickly and giving you the basic, like we upgrading you from holding or uploading a driver's license into capturing, doing a fraud analysis and verifying the driver's license, or as well as passports, etc. And then the next steps for large customers who connecting and getting all the other documents via API. These documents will be available in the near future through API as well. So if you want to store it yourself, you can do that. And you saw this CreditorWatch branding comes in. But large customers, if you want to put your branding, there will be a cost associated, but providing the custom branding capabilities, something we're considering as well, of course, based on the demand. And going to next steps, doing the biometric verification, we close to enable another step. If you want the high volume or high value customers or high risk customers, if you want to go one step further, you want to verify against the actual person, we will be enabling that as well. And on-demand verification, if you want to verify other people rather than the applicant, because this use case is mostly in the sole traders, trusts, etc. You want to verify the high-risk customers who's the applicant, but if you want to do other people, that's in consideration as well, on-demand verification. And going beyond that, adding it to our suite of current fraud detection during the application completion time, we're planning to enhance that even further as well. So that's what the roadmap look like. It's not static. We continuously building that as well. Yeah.
Chamira, I know that we're just up on the time we had slated to close the webinar, and I have seen a couple questions come through. So if it's okay with you, I might take those now.
Perfect. Yeah, let's take it. That's the last slide I wanted to go to.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we did have a few questions pop through, which I'd love to pose to our panelists. One is from Anita. She asked, how does this work for very large international property organizations such as JLL Knight Frank, as there are many employees creating credit accounts on behalf of their employer?
Yeah, I'll take
Very
that
good
one.
question. Yeah.
Sure.
Go on, Samira. That's right into your wheelhouse.
Yeah, perfect. I think, yeah, that's why we're expanding the capabilities to verify. And the number one is the large organizations. You probably don't want people to put through ID verification state process. And if you want to verify the directors, we can have on-demand verification. That's something coming in the near future, as well as there will be other fraud measures you want to validate if the organization is who they claim to be. Then you can find the other fraud, as well as our credit risk analysis. If you know that's the right organization, you can actually use the credit analysis, as well as we already have a pre-fill feature for large organization. Usually they will be in touch before they posting credit application. Using a pre-fill application process, you can actually send your application to a nominated email. So you make sure that someone actually starting that application, receiving that link, verifying that someone not pretending to be and posting a credit application for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The process is going to be the same whether you're small or large. The larger ones just have a more difficult, complex footprint to think about internationally. And you think about, well, how do I verify businesses? When you think about ordering credit, is it a real entity? How do I do that? There's ways to kind of leverage other tools in order to kind of go, we do the same things. We just don't have Australian-based kind of data sets and validity. Our identity solution works globally, but the synthetic entity, how do I verify it's a real entity? How do I make sure that it's actually doing that is slightly more difficult because of the complexity and the global footprint. But in essence, the process still remains the same. It'll just be what technology you can use to validate it on top, to make sure it kind of covers all your kind of user base and not just how do I only look at Australians.
Thank you. We actually had 3 more questions come through. The first is, would this capture more fraud than LexisNexis, and why is the system better? I just wanted to clarify. So the solution we're talking about today, Steve, is LexisNexis's IDVerse solution integrated directly with CreditorWatch's onboarding product, which is called Apply Easy. So it is, in fact, the fraud technology that comes out of LexisNexis. Let's take one from Tracy. How will the photos shown to the provided ID document be checked against the relevant government organization ID document?
That looks right for me. So when we're taking a photo of a document, there's 2 ways to verify a document. You can send the data off it to a government source, like a document verification service, or the DVS as we know. What our technology does is actually using AI powered to look at the actual image itself and go, is it an authentic document? So we're actually, think of it when you're thinking as a forensic analysis, when you turn up to go across the border and they can look at your identity document and prove it's real. They know it's a real document. We know it's got kind of texture. We know the physical security features are in the right place. We know we can actually look and go, the font's right, the font's in the right place. We've got the physical security features. It's a proper actual physical document. It's not a tampered with, a photocopy, a deepfake. So we can use technologies to prove the authenticity without having to worry about any, how do I go and check it against government databases? We can just look at solely at the capture and go, yes, with a fairly high level of confidence, we can prove that that is a real authentic document by using our document authenticity capabilities. So that's kind of a really powerful piece to really hone in on an anchor. I've got a truth of source. And then you can then overlay the kind of the DVS checks on top.
Thank you. And I think we have time for just one last question, which is, where is the data stored? If you need to take legal action and want to serve the person, can you access their photo down the track?
You sure can. So we ensure everything is stored in Australia. Everything is stored, accessed, and making sure we have information stored here, and wherever your information goes, we want to make sure it's there. We do deal, and we would work with CreditorWatch as a kind of a co-joint if there's any sorts of needs for legal action. I do have the joys of getting called into expert witnesses at different federal police. So we have our own kind of reporting and deal with our federal agencies on a regular basis. So stored in Australia, it's there, it's accessible, and it's there if needed from a legal standpoint.
The main reason why we do not transfer 100% of all the documents back to the customer, because you're putting thousands of customers at risk, because you're all responsible now to hold these, while we actually have experts, and it's stored and it's managed very well. And of course, having said that, you already have the need. Let's say 1 in 500, if you have this issue, you can easily contact us and we can provide this additional information. We have done that in the past.
Excellent. So we are slightly over time. Apologies, but I did want to give time for some of those very pertinent questions. I'd like to thank our excellent panelists, Paul, Abdallah, and Shamira. We hope that this session was useful for you. If you do have follow-up questions, feel free to get in touch with us via our website, and we will share the recording of this webinar as well as more information in the next few days. And with that, we hope you have a lovely rest of the work week and an excellent holiday season. And thanks so much for joining us today.